District.
The first Sunday of every month, the American Legion honors a fallen veteran, and Dave was there every single week that he could be there, or every single Sunday that he could be there. And the most impressive thing I remember about Dave was the struggles he had walking from his car to his seat so he could be there for the ceremony. However, when the national anthem was played and the Pledge of Allegiance was recited, Dave stood during the entire time. Not only did he stand, but he held a hand salute the entire time, because he's a proud veteran, a patriot, and what I consider to be one of the greatest generation as described by Tom Brokaw, and a hero in my mind. So if we could just have a moment of silence remembering Dave. We are losing over 300 World War II veterans every day. Thank you. Dave's service is this Saturday at 11 o'clock at Collins Funeral Home. Clerk, if you'll please read the prepared statement and call the roll.
February 13, 2019. Please be advised this meeting is being taped for audio and video broadcast. The meeting will also be closed captioned. It's important that everyone speak clearly into the microphones and only one person speak at a time. Assisted listening devices are available. Mr. Burnett.
Present.
Mr. Corsello. Mr. Hostin. Mr. Sacchinelli. Ms. Smith. Here. Ms. Melendez.
Here.
Mr. Ioannidis.
Here.
Mr. Dumas.
Here.
Ms. Young.
Here.
Mr. Kites.
Here.
Ms. Siegelbaum. Mr. Hempstead.
Here.
Mr. Cyranidis. Mr. Neary.
Here.
Mr. Livingston.
Here.
10 present, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 22nd, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Igneri moves. Any corrections, deletions, omissions? Seeing none, all in favor of the approval of the minutes as submitted? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public participation. If you would please approach the mic, speak into the mic, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Paul Cantor.
Good evening. My name is Paul Cantor, and I live at 184 Phillips Street, Norwalk, Connecticut. Only yesterday, articles in the Hour and Nancy O. Norwalk alerted the public that today you are to vote on a proposal to restructure more than $2 million in loans to the Oak Hills Park Authority for a fourth time. In fact, the proposal isn't to restructure the loans. It is to forgive them altogether. It is, in other words, to turn the loans into grants. And the decision to do so was made behind closed doors without any input from taxpayers. Always the hope of citizens in a democracy is that their elected officials will rise above the pressures placed on them by special interest groups in order to represent the interest of all of those that they have been elected to represent. But with respect to Oak Hills, we just do not see that happening. Hence, now we have another so-called restructuring of the Oak Hills Park Authority's debt. The proposed restructuring would have the taxpayers of Norwalk add more than $2,200,000 to the $1,000,000 $500,000 grant the authority received in 2014, bringing the total to $3,700,000. And how will taxpayers be compensated for such largesse? If approved, the authority would be required to pay, according to the proposal, to pay back $2 per round played, or $70,000 per year if 35,000 rounds are played annually. At $70,000 per year, it would take more than 30 years for the Oak Hills Park Authority to pay back in inflation-depreciated dollars the principal on what had become a restructured $2,200,000 zero-interest taxpayer loan. And that is not even taking into account the fact that given the decrease in the demand to play golf, there is no guarantee that 35,000 rounds will be played. So I ask you, when is the Oak Hills Park Authority charade going to end? In 1967, the state purchased the land in what is now Oak Hills Park and granted it to the city with a stipulation that the land not be conveyed to any other use other than recreation or conservation purposes. Then a 1999 master plan for Oak Hills called for wider uses for the park. In short, years ago, our elected officials recognized that if there's one thing Norwalk sorely lacks, it is a readily accessible public park close to its downtown. So please put an end to the charade and turn Oak Hills into the kind of public park near the heart of our city that taxpayers were promised, deserve, want, and so desperately need. Please do not vote to restructure this loan for the fourth time to the Oak Hills Park Authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor.
Yvonne Lepore.
Good evening. My name is Yvonne Lopaur, and I live on Philo Street in Norwalk. The public only learned about the proposed restructuring of the Oak Hills Park Authority loans from articles in the Hour and Nancy on Norwalk yesterday. Let me read to you some of the comments that were made on Nancy on Norwalk. Mitch Addis, he wrote, "What a scam. Turn Oak Hills into a park and call it a day." Peter Berman sarcastically commented, "Let's have more restructurings to help subsidize golfers from Norwalk and surrounding towns. It's a Norwalk tradition." Al Bohr pointed out that the Oak Hills Park Authority maintained a bar was going to solve all of the restaurant's problems and it would be able to survive on its own 2 feet. Sandra wrote, "This self-centered group has made it a private country club on the taxpayer's back." Bill McFarlane commented, well, here we go again. It's time our city officials put the park back under the city operations. Enough is enough." Paul Passarelli asked, "How many of tax dollars were wasted on this boondoggle?" And as I pointed out long ago, municipal golf courses are not public goods that taxpayers should be subsidizing. Indeed, municipal golf courses compete with privately owned tax-paying, not subsidized courses. Furthermore, money used to subsidize them has higher priority uses in our schools and elsewhere. In other words, essential city services suffer when taxpayers' dollars are diverted to subsidize a money-losing 18-hole municipal golf course. Please, in the interest of all the taxpayers of Norwalk, do not vote to again restructure millions of dollars of loans to the Oak Hills Park Authority. Instead, abolish the authority and turn Oak Hills back into a public park that serves the interest of all the residents of Norwalk and not just less than 10% minority who play golf. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you.
we have received 2 emails from people who could not make it to this meeting, and they expressed their opinion about restructuring. I would like them to be put into the record.
Yes, if you could pass them to us, that'd be great. Thank you.
Diane Keefe.
Diane Keefe from 249 Chestnut Hill Road in Norwalk. I also just read about it on Nancy on Norwalk yesterday, or this morning, come to think of it. I objected and had some of the same thoughts as the 2 prior speakers. Firstly, I do think it would be a good idea to put it under Parks and Rec, because Parks and Rec does effectively manage the property at Cranberry Park and brings in quite a bit of revenue to the city. There, and also at Campo Beach, there's a restaurant there that doesn't seem to have the same kinds of problems functioning. It's a public entity with a golf course, but they do have an ice skating rink, so it makes it not a one-season activity. So I think if we open the park to 4 seasons of activity and not confine it to golf and tennis in the summertime, it would be more attractive. And I think if we put it out on an RFP process to local restaurateurs, you could find people who would want to take that building and run a business out of it and give the city hundreds of thousands of revenue from weddings and other catering activities. And I think the 3-season element of it could really make a difference. Also, I object to the $83,000 being the reason why we have to make the decision on the restructuring now. I think if the authority needs a short-term loan to bail out this most recent expense, that's one thing, but dealing with the $2 million plus along with it, I completely object to it. I think that the structure of having a no-interest loan is horrible. It doesn't send the incentives are not in the right direction for repayment. What is the motivation of a borrower who has no interest on a loan to ever pay it back? So I object to the restructuring, and I think many of the citizens would not feel like this is in the citizens' interest, where we're paying taxes to get more than a golf course. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keefe.
Morris Gross.
So good evening. I'm here to talk about the medical office building and the complex that is planned for the YMCA property on West Avenue. Norwalk Hospital acquired that property in 2013. And the reason that it acquired it is because it envisioned the need for a major outpatient building. If you were to look at the outpatient services that Norwalk Hospital has in Norwalk, there's very little. We have one site that we added on the Westport line that we took over from Stanford Hospital, but most of the outpatient services that we have are either in the hospital, which don't belong in the hospital because of the difficulty of getting to the hospital, parking, et cetera. It's really not convenient. But most of the services we have for outpatient care are situated on Stevens Street in the old buildings that go back to 1929 and the 1930s, 1950, and 1962. If any of you have been in those buildings, they present themselves very poorly. Access is extremely difficult, and it really doesn't serve the purpose of providing the best patient care for our patients. So the hospital was very happy to acquire the YMCA property. With that, we plan on having, it's about a 254,000 square foot building. Approximately 154,000 will be medical office, and will house a number of services that, some of which, again, we have in the hospital, but others that were totally out of space. So it's not, because I've been with the hospital system for about 45 years, I can tell you finding space is always difficult. But having a property that is zoned correctly, so close to the hospital, is a real opportunity and a fantastic catch that the hospital is able to pick up. And in there, we would have all the critical outpatient medical services that we know are required within this community, and quite frankly, the residents of the city really should have that. So we're happy to say that this is a project of which we've launched. We've met with a number of the agencies and bodies here, regulatory bodies within the hospital, within the city, in order to brief them as to what we're planning to do. It would stand out as a real gem as far as the building itself. It would focus on not just providing care, let's say cardiology, pulmonary services, endocrinology, imaging services, and all the obvious things that people require, but it also will have a focus on healthy living. That is, we would tie back to the hospital. So whether it's education, training, and a number of the things that we do at the hospital, as now we're even developing a simulation training lab at the hospital, which is something that the community would benefit from, but also it's a major educational component. Basically, you have mannequins and very sophisticated type of mannequins for training for our medical students, nurses, and others, and so on. But a lot of the other services that we would provide for education would tie back to the hospital. So I've been involved on the redevelopment agencies, where we plan on tying the hospital through sidewalks, lighting, signage. This property with the YMCA is on now. And quite frankly, the YMCA property right now is problematic. We want to do something good with the property, as I described, but it's not unusual, as I was advised again this morning, that we had people break into that building again, and some of our houses that we have 3 houses on the property. We also have a historic house on the property. We've worked with the Historic Commission here in town.
You're at about 4 minutes, so if you could start to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the bottom line is that we're taking a property that today provides very little value to the community and creating a major medical addition through our health system, providing great benefits to the city of Norwalk. There's a very handsome building that we put on the property. It would generate tax revenue. It would provide about 300 jobs also to the community. And so I respectfully request approval from this body.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christopher Smith.
What's that?
Good evening. My name is Chris Smith. I'm with Maplewood Healthcare. As Morris described, the plan for the property is the development of a 254,000 square foot wellness center, which basically would include 154,000 square feet of medical office space, 74,000 feet of senior housing, and about 17,000 square feet of retail space that would be a combination of physical medicine and wellness and a grocer or green grocer or cafe, and making it in a design and a concept that would be not only intergenerational, but would be for part of the community. And so Morris and the hospital has tasked Maplewood Healthcare with the job of creating the envelope and building this building that would be designed by Gensler, which is one of the largest architectural firms in the world. We're working with Whiting Turner, which is one of the largest national construction management general contractors in the country. And we feel like we've assembled over the last several months a great team, and the location that we're talking about is ideal for the hospital as it's going through this transformation and rebirth really for the hospital and what it's trying to do on campus as well as off campus, and provide access to health care not only for the seniors that would be in the senior living component of the property, but also for the residents that are in Norwalk. So we're excited about the opportunity. We hope that you will vote positively tonight to give us an opportunity to execute on that and have it come to fruition, something that the hospital and Maplewood Healthcare and Maplewood Senior Living. We're very proud and excited about what we think we can deliver. And it's something that for all of us, including Morris, that it's not only a investment in development, but also a legacy property that we all are putting additional time and effort and energy in, knowing that it's not only something that we're going to do that's economic, that it's also something ideally for us that we can duplicate in other parts of the country. This is a really unique situation where it's one of the first opportunities where there's a co-location, where there's a senior living component with a clinical ambulatory care center. So again, thank you for your time tonight, and I hope that you would vote in favor for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Bonifant.
Good evening, Rich Bonifant, 17 Park Hill Avenue. Nice to see you. I also want to speak on the item that the last two gentlemen spoke on, item 7D1 about the disposition of land to the hospital. I'm not generally in favor of selling off city land. It belongs to the people in Norwalk, okay? I happen to notice that no price was listed in the agenda, which is a little shaky, but I read enough news articles to figure out how much the prices were. I just refer to the night that they presented their, I guess they made a presentation on September 5th to the Land Use Committee, and you'll see on, well, you might not have it, but I'll read the last sentence. Says, the development will be a community hub that not only generates jobs for the city of Norwalk, but will also produce substantial real estate tax dollars through the fully taxable real property. I hope you hold them to that. To get that one in writing, because you know, if you can't guarantee that the hospital is going to pay full taxes on that, like that they won't turn it into a nonprofit, or they won't come for some locally sponsored tax break, then I think you're better off just leasing it to them for $100 grand a year and calling it your property. They want it and they'd pay it. This way you wouldn't have to worry about the changing status of the nonprofit type of thing, and you didn't sell off your land. But I'm not sure I'm going to change anybody's mind tonight. The other thing that is a little bit disturbing is that the property has a deed restriction that be open to the public, or it's going to be public land or something. And part of the agreement is that they're passing it through the city roughly over a little $200,000 to get out of a deed restriction. Now that's a scary thought. That are deed restrictions for sale these days? I mean, can you buy your way out of Taylor Farm? Can you buy your way out of any deed restriction? And that's kind of like makes me nervous thinking about that anything can be bought off, and like people think, oh, they could never build in my woods because there's a deed restriction. Yeah, well, for 200 grand, we can buy our way out of that one too. So anyway, please use your heads on this one, and thank you very much. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Mr. Bonifant. Okay, the next item on the agenda is resignations and appointments. We have no resignations. We have several appointments to the Board of Assessment Appeals. We try to increase that every reval year at least, because we know that there are going to be appeals to the assessments that people received. So if you would, I'll read them off. All to the Board of Assessment Appeals, there'll be regulars. I'll read them off first, and maybe if you would vote on them as a block. To the Board of Assessment Appeals regular, Marianne Burrell, Megan Douglas, Elliot C. Morales, Donald Overton, Harriet Petrides, and Steve Scatamaccia, and Janet Woodward. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Igneri moves. Any comment, discussion? All in favor, please signal by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. To the Board of Assessment Appeals alternate position, Doris M. Ash, Cindy Ellerman, and Judith G. Hires. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Igneri moves. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the mayor's comment section. I've already spoken about Dave Evans, a personal friend of mine who sadly passed away last week. We recognize, as does the nation, Black History Month is February, and I would like to read a proclamation for Black History Month, February 2019. Whereas February is officially designated as Black History Month and is a time to emphasize the contributions of African Americans to the history of the United States. And whereas Black History Month will be celebrated throughout the United States with programs and activities that recognize and raise awareness of the many accomplishments of African Americans and to honor their heritage and culture. And whereas African American leaders have contributed significantly to the growth of our nation through their proud and noble culture, rich in art, education, government, music, and science. And whereas during the month of February, we will recognize the hard work, dedication, and contributions of African Americans and honor the many leaders who have enriched our heritage, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Coretta Scott King. Now, therefore, I, Harry W. Rilling, Mayor of the City of Norwalk, Connecticut, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2019 as Black History Month in Norwalk, and in doing so, ask all residents to recognize the valuable role of the African American community that they have played in the history of our nation. In witness whereof I have set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Norwalk to be affixed this 12th day of February 2019. So again, thank you. And you can give a round of applause for Black History Month. Thank you. Again this year, we are very proud to partner with VITA. There's a free tax prep and filing available through a program provided by volunteers in tax tax assistance, the AARP, the IRS through February 15th, 2019, which, by the way, is the last day you can file your taxes. Locations are Norwalk City Hall on Tuesdays from 1:30 to 8 p.m., the Norwalk Public Library, Belden Avenue, Thursdays from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., Norwalk Senior Center on Fridays by appointment, the South Norwalk Library, 10 Washington Street, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. There are some restrictions based on your income levels, so if you'll get on our city website, I'm sure you'll be able to find out whether you're eligible to have your taxes prepared for free. On Wednesday, February 20th, there will be an informational meeting regarding Wall Street parking at the Yankee Doodle Garage. For those of you who may like a little bit of a lead as to where it's going, several years ago, the City of Norwalk allocated money for infrastructure improvements on Wall Street. One of the things that I had proposed was that we have angled parking at some of the, many of you who might have lived long enough in Norwalk to remember Wall Street, where they had pull-in angled parking many, many years ago on both sides of the street. We're looking now to have angled parking on the eastbound side of the street and adding some other improvements, and we will have actually, it's not the eastbound side, it's the eastbound direction, the southbound side. And we will be having some improvements. And I believe they're going to add somewhere around 6 parking places. And they're also talking about installing meters there, which will time people. And that is something that the merchants and owners of property on Wall Street have asked for quite some time. So it'll be an informational meeting. Again, that'll be at the Yankee Doodle Garage, 5:30 p.m. There's a new conference room at the Yankee Doodle Garage downstairs. You have to enter the garage to get into it. Now also enjoy President's Day this coming Monday, February 18th. It's when we pause to honor the great presidents of the United States, most specifically Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. And tomorrow, for all loving couples, we wish you a very, very happy Valentine's Day. That's all I have. So, Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Mayor, may I just add one?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Kites.
Just quickly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to remind everyone, I know we talked about it a little bit before, but February 20th is the deadline to file your tax appeal. Just wanted to make sure to get that out there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on the agenda, I'm going to move in the adoption of council rules as amended. In your package, you will receive the council rules with a new item 25. This is, I think we've talked about it with most of you before, but what this does, it doesn't change current committee assignment, but what it does is provide that members are not appointed to a particular committee are deemed to be ex officio members of those other committees. That means they can participate in discussion, but they do not count for purposes of quorum, nor are they allowed to vote. The reason for this is to recognize the past practice that this council had before I even came on, where council members would be able to go to committee meetings and participate in discussion. And I think the most important aspect of this is I think it allows council members to become better informed by attending and asking questions at committee meetings. So open it for discussion on this. Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, passed unanimously. Thank you.
He made the motion.
I did make the motion.
Mr. Livingston.
Now we'll turn to consent calendar to be read by Ms. Young. As a reminder to those out there, if your item is on the agenda, on the consent calendar as approved, will be deemed approved, and there'll be no further discussion. And Mr. Burnett, you're next month, next meeting.
How long do we have?
As long as you want.
All right. Okay, what am I doing? 7A, Health, Welfare, Public Safety Committee. 7A1, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, instruments, and amendments necessary to request and accept grant funds under Connecticut Department of Transportation.
Ms. Young, I believe you skipped the Corporation Council item.
Where?
Page 6.
6.
It's on the first page at the very
Oh, I'm sorry. Certainly did. Sorry about that. 6, reports, Department, Board and Commissions. 6A1, Corporation Council, approve authorization to settle claim. Okay. Maria Rodriguez Morin versus Douglas Bamford and the City of Norwalk. 7A1, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, instruments, and amendments necessary to request and accept grant funds under Connecticut Department of Transportation 2019 Distracted Driving High Visibility Enforcement Grant in the amount of $49,800. 7A2A, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents necessary to apply for and accept grant funds from the state of Connecticut for the preventive health block grant in the amount of $22,673 for the period October 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2019. 7A2B, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, instruments, or amendments as may be necessary to implement the preventive health block grant for the period October 1, 2018 to September 30th, 2019. 7A3, authorize the purchasing agent to issue a sole source purchase order to Seraphin, a division of Pemberton Fabricators, Inc., for a fully enclosed Seraphin low-profile slip-on testing trailer in the amount of $30,541. Account numbers noted. 7B1, under Public Works Committee, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents between the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Norwalk Water Pollution Control Authority in connection with a FEMA grant application titled City of Norwalk 5 Mile River Pump Station Upgrade PDM 2018. This grant is for the project cost of 75%. Which is $135,000 FEMA funds, and 25%, which is $45,000 WPCA funds. 7B2, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents between FEMA and the WPCA in connection with a FEMA grant application titled City of Norwalk 5 Mile River Pump Station Upgrade, FMA 2018. This grant is for project cost of 75%, which totals $135,000, FEMA funds, and 25%, which totals $45,000 WPCA funds. 7B3, authorize the Mayor Harry B. Rilling to execute any and all documents between FEMA and the WPCA in connection with a FEMA grant application titled City of Norwalk Keeler Brook Pump Station Upgrade, PDM 2018. This grant is for project cost of 75%, which is $2,225,000 FEMA funds and 25%, $750,000 for WPCA funds. 7B4, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all documents between FEMA and the WPCA in connection with the FEMA grant titled City of Norwalk Keeler Pump Station, sounds like I'm reading this twice, Upgrade FEMA 2018. This grant is for project cost of 75% at $2,250,000 FEMA funds and 25%, $750,000 for WPCA funds. 7B5, approve the abandonment, discontinuance of a portion of Stevens Street beginning at the easterly boundary of the city property located at 340 West Avenue, tax lot 1-8-15-0, and heading west to the westerly boundary of the city property located at 350 West Avenue, tax lot 1-8-39-0, as depicted on a map prepared by Ryan and Falls Land Surveyors, a Redness and Mead Company, entitled Property Survey Abandonment Map of a portion of Stevens Street, Norwalk, Connecticut, dated October 4th, 2018, at a scale of 1:20, on file in the Department of Public Works, indicating said portion of Stevens Street to be abandoned and incorporated into the existing city properties located at 340 West Avenue and 350 West Avenue, subject to an easement for the existing Norwalk River Valley multipurpose trail. 7B6, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all necessary or desired documents in connection with the finalization of the discontinuance and release of the city's interest in the discontinued roadway, including a general release to release any interest that the city may have in the property comprising the abandoned portion of Stevens Street beginning at the easterly boundary of the city property located at 340 West Avenue and heading west to the westerly boundary of the city property located at 350 West Avenue, as depicted on a map prepared by Ryan and Falls Land Surveyors, a Redness and Mead Company, entitled Property Survey Abandonment Map of a portion of Stevens Street, Norwalk, Connecticut, dated October 4th, 2018, at a scale of 1:20, on file in the Department of Public Works, indicating said portion of Stevens Street to be abandoned and incorporated into the existing city properties located at 340 West Avenue and 350 West Avenue, subject to an easement for the existing Norwalk River Valley multipurpose trail. 7C1, Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Affairs, rescind the council approval of January 22nd, 2019, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with MBI for the use of Norwalk High School front lawn and parking area for their Norwalk High School Winter Guard Percussion Home Show to be held Saturday, March 23rd, 2019, from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Estimated attendance, 2,500 staggered. 7C2, approve as revised, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with Marching Bears, Inc. for the use of Norwalk High School front lawn and parking area for their Norwalk High School Winter Guard Percussion Home Show to be held Saturday, March 23rd, 2019, from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Estimated attendance, 2,500 staggered. 7D1, Land Use and Building Management Committee, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all, 7D2. Authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a license agreement with Blue Teapot LLC to provide cafe services at the Belden Main Library for 1 year with a 1-year extension option. Terms for the agreement shall be outlined in Christine Bradley's memo dated January 18, 2019. 7D3, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute an amendment to the administrative settlement agreement between the State of Connecticut and the City of Norwalk for the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk Functional Replacement Project in order for the state to provide funding directly to the city and the city to have full responsibility in the management of the funds and project-related contracts necessary to implement the project. 7C4, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to amend the finance agreement with Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk dated August 20th, 2018 for the functional replacement project in order for the city to receive the state's functional replacement funds directly and to have fund project management responsibilities necessary to implement the project. 7C5, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute an amendment to amended and restated lease agreement with the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk in order to terminate Amendment 1 and to incorporate new terms for the city to receive the state's functional replacement funds directly and to have full project management responsibilities necessary to implement the project. 7C6, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute an agreement with Blinder Bell Architects and Planner, LLP, for the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk Functional Replacement Project to provide schematic redesign services and allow for design development and construction document phases for a total not to exceed $225,000. Funds available from the state's Maritime Aquarium Functional Replacement Grant. 7C7, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute a contract with AP Construction / O&G Industries as a joint venture for the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk Functional Replacement Project. The terms of the agreement shall include the following: pre-construction services fee of $118,760, CM fee at 2.45%, CM contingency at 3%. Funds available from the state's Maritime Aquarium Functional Replacement Grant. 7C8A, rescind Common Council action of August 14th, 2018, item 7D2, which authorized the following. Authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute an agreement with Strategic Building Solutions, LLC, doing business as Colliers International, to provide commissioning services for the Ponus Ridge School additions and renovations project for a total not to exceed $80,350. Account numbers noted. 7C8B, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute an agreement with Horizon Engineering Associates, LLP, to provide building mechanical equipment commissioning services for the Ponus Ridge School additions and renovations project for a total not to exceed $76,800. Account numbers noted. 7C8C, authorize NFCC to issue change orders on contract for a total not to exceed $7,680. 7C9, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all documents with Eversource for the installation of a new gas service to Ponus Ridge School for a total not to exceed $30,000. Account numbers noted. 7C10A, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute an agreement with All State Construction, Inc. for the installation of new fresh air intake equipment at DPW Garage Administration offices for a total not to exceed $31,971. Account numbers noted. 7C10B, authorize the Office of Building Management to issue change orders on contract for a total not to exceed $3,200.
Well done. Is there any discussion, any comments on the consent calendar as read? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? No, unanimous. Send Mr. Burnett, your next meeting, and back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Just the question, is 7A, 2B on the consent? I believe it is.
Yeah, it's land use.
Okay, so land use, Mr. Livingston, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'll move the following item and speak to it. This is 71, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all documents necessary for the disposition of West Avenue parking lot, District 1, Block 8, Lot 15 and 39, 340 and 350 West Avenue, to Norwalk Hospital Association, which may include but not limited to related leases and easements. Terms and conditions shall be as outlined in Alan Lowe's memo dated December 5th, 2018. We've heard a lot about this, particularly from some of the speakers tonight. I just wanted to comment on a couple things. First off, the Norwalk Hospital was the only entity that replied to the RFP for that property, and they are offering the appraised value for the parking lot, which, Rich, is in here at $950,000. That's the appraised value which they will be paying to the city. Of that money, the city will pay $176,000 to the state to release the deed restriction that is in there, dating back from the time when Route 7 was put in. When this first came up to the Land Use Committee, we had a number of discussions about a couple things, including the parking lot that we're talking about here, as well as the historic properties on that property as a whole. We talked to the Historical Commission, we talked among ourselves, and at the end of that discussion, we worked out an arrangement with the hospital, which is set forth in this memo. And I just wanted to read these points to get them into the record and make sure everybody understands them. So this is from page 2 of Alan's note. It says, the hospital shall obtain a U.S. Department of Interior Level 3 historical report. That is a report that basically makes a record of all of the historic properties on the site now, so that anybody looking back in the future can see the details and all basically the design features of those properties. And additionally, within the interior of the new development, the hospital should incorporate a photo gallery and displays of architectural elements with historical value to document some of the historical significant structures on West Avenue, including the structures currently on the site, as well as the overall historical character of the area. Again, that's because there are historic buildings in the site. We in the Historical Commission wanted to make sure that there was some recognition of those properties, and the hospital has graciously agreed to include these provisions, these items in their new building. As I said, we're also concerned about the parking, which is often used for overflow for events at Matthews Park. So what the hospital's agreed to do was to execute a mutually acceptable lease agreement with the city for the continued use of the parking lot for Matthews Park special event overflow parking prior to the start of construction. We don't know when they'll start, but we want to make sure we have access to the property until they do. Once they start, they probably will not be able to get into the property. They're going to work to let us in if there is available space, but assuming we're not, they've agreed that they will execute, following completion, a 99-year lease agreement to provide 50 parking spaces within the parking structure for Matthews Park special event overflow parking upon completion of the construction. So I think it worked out very well. It was the hospital very accommodating to the needs of the city, and I think it's a good arrangement. I think it should be approved.
So Mr. Livingston has moved the item. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Burnett.
Yes, thank you. Item 7E1, resolution authorize the mayor. Well, let me say I'd like to move this item. I'll state it first.
Mr. Burnett moving 71.
The mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, and instruments necessary for the city of Norwalk to make a special appropriation totaling $83,000 to increase the available funds in the Oak Hill City account 01-6110-5258, other professional services, with a transfer from contingency account 01-9600-5900. Resolution 2. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, and instruments necessary for the city of Norwalk to restructure all city loans to Oak Hills Park authorities, restructure terms which indicate 0.00% interest rate, retroactive to fiscal year 2017. monthly payments commencing July 1st, 2020, monthly loan payments equal to $2 multiplied by the aggregate number of 9 and 18 rounds of golf purchased per month in the first fiscal year, increasing by 5 cents every fiscal year thereafter, plus an annual payment of 1% audited gross golf revenue. Oak Hills Park Authority shall not be obligated to borrow on its line of credit to take the 1% audited gross golf revenue payment. Resolution 3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, and instruments necessary for the city of Norwalk to amend the terms of its lease with Oak Hills Park Authority for Oak Hills Park. Principal terms, extending the lease term for 30 years through 2049, modification of Oak Hills Park Authority's default terms, whereby a default under the restructured loan with the city of Norwalk is the default under the lease. Removal of the lease term prohibiting a restaurant bar starting in fiscal year 2021. 50% of net rental payments from food services vendor up to a reasonable cap to be negotiated to be set aside in a fund of capital improvements to the restaurant building. Selection process for retaining food services vendor in terms of any lease offered to said vendor shall be subject to common council approval.
So, Mr. Burnett, the agenda items I have, there were amendments, is that?
No, they were amended as I stated them.
Okay. So, item 1 of Resolution 1 was amended to strike out the capital appropriation as opposed to just a special appropriation.
Correct, and also the actual funding source accounts was also.
The funding source accounts. So, I think we should then, you move them together, maybe because of their amended, we'll vote on them individually.
Okay,
So item number 1, the resolution has been moved. First, we must approve the amendment by Mr. Burnett. Is there a motion? Mr. Burnett has made the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please signal. Opposed? Abstentions? That carries unanimously. Now we vote on the resolution. So a vote on the resolution as proposed by Mr. Burnett. Any further discussion?
Just one, right?
Just
number 1.
Just number 1.
Okay. Just clear.
Mr. Hempstead.
No, it's the first one, the one right now.
No discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Mr. Dumas, in favor? Ms. Young? In favor? Opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain. Okay, so 9 in favor, 1 abstention. The motion carries. I do not believe there was any amendment to Resolution 2. Is that correct?
That is correct. It, as
written.
As read is as it's stated.
Okay, so item, Resolution number 2, as submitted on your agenda, Mr. Burnett has moved. Any further discussion? Mr. Hempstead.
Mr. Mayor, I want to thank for finally this has come to fruition to some point. This was actually discussed under when Mr. Bertrini was the chair of Parks and Rec, and he's not been on the council for 5 years. So in the sense of being out in the public, this was probably discussed almost every other finance meeting that we've had over the last few years. The city did run Oak Hills at some point, way back before the authority was started. The city put in all the capital improvements into that. It came out of the capital account for the city. And there was always operating subsidies every year because it never made enough money to fund itself. That's why the authority was put in place. In the beginning, I was not around for it. The authority was put in place was so it would be self-sufficient. The problem is the authority, for some reason, decided it shouldered a building that was $3-some-odd million that you could never get the revenue out of that building to pay for the debt service on that bond for that building. I think this finally kind of levels the playing field and gives an opportunity for them to pay that back. I think it's also was a great suggestion, and I think it was the mayor's, if I remember correctly, about charging per round of golf and be paid the following month. It gives them the ability to adjust their budgets when there's no golfing going on, so there's no obligation if nobody plays golf for the month of January because it's snowed in. But as the rounds go up in March, April, May, more May, June, July, I guess, then the city will have more revenues. I think it's a good balancing act. And hopefully from this point forward, we don't have to do that because I was around for a few rounds of those renegotiations, some of those leases, but I think this probably is a good fair play across the board for everybody and probably gives them some latitude and the city some assurance they're going to get some of their money back.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to just follow up on Mr. Hempstead's comments. I won't go through them all again. I just want to be clear, we're not forgiving the loan.
Right.
We're forgiving the interest. I think earlier somebody mentioned we're forgiving the loan. We're not. And what we've done here is to try and create a mechanism that permits the authority to make a realistic payments on this. We know the experience where they have not been able to make the payments for the reasons Mr. Hempstead mentioned. And I think it's important to note that a couple of things in this proposal, one of which is that they're required to make payments on a monthly basis, so it's not likely that, or can't fall behind the end of the year, find out they don't have money. It's going to be paid every month, except for the annual payment of the 1%. Also, we've structured it so that the payment goes up 5 cents every year. It may not sound like a lot, but it incrementally, it just requires that we get a little more every year as they're able to get a more solid footing. So I think it is a good arrangement. I mean, I personally don't play golf, but I do recognize the value of Oak Hills to the community and to the city. I think it's a good proposal. It should be supported.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Further, Mr. Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also do not play golf or won't admit that I play golf. But Oak Hills Park, with a recently renovated 18-hole course, the tennis courts, the nature trail, and the restaurant is just one of several great attractions in our city. These resolutions before the council this evening will assist Oak Hills Authority to continue to maintain one of the top public courses in the area while developing a financial level of stability necessary to manage the facility. The special appropriation of $83,000 essentially is covering the cost of customized equipment in the restaurant, which was previously purchased by local authorities during auction. And the restructuring of the combined loans generates a regular cadence of monthly payments to the city towards paying down on the $2 million debt. And finally, the lease terms allows for a restaurant bar area and further solidifies the Oak Hills partnership between the authority and the city. There is always more that we can do. However, this is a forward step in the right direction to maintain and enhance one of Norwalk's key venues. And I truly hope that we support all three resolutions.
Thank you. Further discussion on resolution number 2. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Now we must vote on resolution number 3 as
which had two amendments.
As amended by Mr. Burnett. So all in favor of the amendments to the motion? Opposed? Abstentions? I guess you're both in favor?
Yeah.
Motion, the amendment to the resolution passes. Now the vote on the resolution as amended. Further discussion.
Right.
Seeing none, I would just like to make a comment, if I might. I do want to thank and note exactly what Mr. Hempstead said. This has been on the table trying to help Oak Hills get out of a situation that has existed for many, many, many years, to no fault of the authority that sits now. Moreover, if the city were to take over the running of Oak Hills Park, we would have to hire staff to maintain it. And with the staff go benefits, workman's comp issues, and all other things which now fall under the responsibility of the authority. The other thing, one person mentioned about having an RFP for the food vendor. That is our intention, to make sure that we draw in the right food vendor. And so I think and I want to thank council leadership and Mr. Burnett for working so diligently to make this happen. There were many iterations back and forth. I want to thank Oak Hills for sitting at the table and working with us so that we can finally get you to a point where this loan will be paid. It will be paid in time, and it will be paid down on a monthly basis with an annual 1% payment. So again, thank you to everybody, because it was a challenge, and I recognize the issue with some of the people that spoke against it. We certainly had our reservations, but it is a park, it is a golf course, it is a gem in the city. It does bring people into the city of Norwalk, and it is one of the city's jewels and one of the things for which the city is known. So again, thank you, and with that, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Next motion is either Mr. Ignari's or Mr. Hempstead's.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, was that Ms. Melendez? She beat you to it. Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Good meeting.